He slammed the car door, drew his gun, shouted, "Out of the car! Hand on the hood! Black man plus luxury car equals search." No warning, no reason, just raw power. Under the burning sun of Raventon Springs, the man stepped out. No yelling, no fear, just one move. He reached into his coat and pulled out a card. Halvorsen looked, then froze. His eyes locked on the bold, raised print. Major General Langston Merriweather. Not a civilian, not a criminal, but a military legend. A man who once saved his entire unit in the deserts of Iraq, now being searched like a drug mule, right in the heart of America. What the officer didn't know was that every second of it was being live-streamed. Where are you watching from? Have you ever seen someone humiliated like this, just because of their skin? If this is your first time here on Mr. 7 Stories, hit subscribe, tap like, and drop a comment with your city. Because this story, you won't be able to look away. This time, the man they tried to humiliate stood tall. In the heat of a June noon, sunlight scorched the asphalt of Millstone Avenue, the main street of Raventon Springs, Georgia. The blacktop shimmered under 97 degrees of heat, thick with the smell of dust, tar, and a kind of exhaustion no one could name. The awnings of the grocery store, barber shop, and Cafe Briar Hall sat empty. The town's residents tucked themselves inside old brick buildings, hiding under air conditioning, as if the whole place had been swallowed by an endless, suffocating stillness. Inside patrol car unit number 412 parked along the curb. Officer Brent Halvorsen, 38, white, broad-shouldered, sat alone, slouched back in a frayed cloth seat, sipping from a crumpled foam cup of cold coffee. It was too hot for trouble. No accidents, no fights, no sirens, just a noon so quiet it frayed the nerves. Halvorsen didn't complain out loud, but the way his fingers tapped the steering wheel and his distant stare said more than words. To him, peace that lasted too long was boredom, and boredom often stirred a craving for control. A sharp beep sliced through the silence. The radar blinked, 72 miles per hour. Halvorsen sat up. The speed limit here was 55. He muttered, "Finally, something to do." In the distance, a black SUV was flying toward town. Sunlight bounced off its roof like a mirror in motion, the wheels leaving blinding streaks of glare behind them. Halvorsen tossed his coffee cup in the door pocket, flipped on the emergency lights, and yanked the gear shift. The engine roared. "Drive like that, and you'll end up in a cell," he muttered, a crooked grin forming on his lips. Nobody outruns the cops in Raventon Springs. That was something Halvorsen believed in deeply. Cases like this, small, clear, easy to handle, were how he affirmed his role. The lawman in a town that hadn't changed in 50 years. The SUV showed no sign of slowing. Halvorsen started to enjoy himself. His hand hovered over the radio, but he didn't report it in. He figured this was just a light stop, just enough to keep someone in line. Finally, after half a mile, the SUV eased to the shoulder. Strangely calm, it came to a complete stop. No doors opened. Halvorsen pulled up behind it, stepped out, adjusted his belt, and lowered his hat into place. From his shirt pocket, he pulled out his citation pad, an unconscious motion he'd done 100 times. As he approached the vehicle, the driver's door opened. A black man stepped out. Tall, upright shoulders, a navy blue tailored suit, polished black shoes that caught the sunlight, salt and pepper hair, trimmed close. No wasted movements. His expression calm, almost composed, as if he not only knew he'd be stopped, but knew exactly why. Halvorsen squinted. Not a drug runner, not a troublemaker. Still, he kept his voice firm. License and registration. The man didn't say a word. He quietly pulled out a leather wallet and handed over a military ID card. Halvorsen took it. His eyes ran over the embossed letters. Major General Langston Merriweather. He froze. The man standing in front of him wasn't some reckless driver. He was a general, a war hero, a national figure who had led dozens of Middle East operations and received the Medal of Honor from the president himself. Something uneasy stirred in Halvorsen's chest, but he didn't back down. He didn't care who this man was, because in Raventon Springs, he thought, the law is still the law, and no one stands above it. Halvorsen clenched the military ID in his hand so tightly that the veins popped along his wrist. The words Major General Langston Merriweather burned into his eyes. But he didn't allow himself to show surprise. Instead, he lowered his gaze and shot back a cold stare, trying to act like that name meant absolutely nothing. "You're aware you were speeding?" Halvorsen said, his tone clipped and stern, like a teacher scolding a disobedient student. The general didn't flinch. His hand rested calmly at his side, and his voice, steady and firm, sounded like it had been forged in fire. "Yes, I was speeding, and I'm prepared to take responsibility. No excuses, no arguing. Just a clear, direct answer, devoid of fear." That made Halvorsen burn inside. The calmness, the upright posture, the voice that didn't drop even a single inch in deference. All of it scratched at a sore spot deep inside him, a place he couldn't even name. Because what he saw in this man wasn't disrespect for the law, but something worse. Disregard for his authority. A patrol cop from a backwater town. A man who spent his days pulling over old folks for driving 5 miles over the limit. And here stood a man who didn't see him. Not really. Merriweather didn't say another word. Sunlight glinted off his shoulder, dancing across his tailored suit. He wasn't arrogant, but his presence made Halvorsen feel small. Suddenly, the name Merriweather wasn't just a name. It was a mirror, reflecting everything Halvorsen didn't have. Honor, achievement, the respect of a nation. And then that bitter voice inside him started to scream. Why do they always act like they're special? Why do they stand so tall, so unshaken, like the law can't touch them? Heroes? Public figures? But do they understand the sacrifice guys like me make to keep this town safe? Halvorsen stepped closer, citation pad in hand, but didn't write anything. Instead, his voice dropped cold. "Place your hands on the hood." Merriweather's brow furrowed slightly, but he didn't resist, didn't argue. He simply turned, slowly, and placed both hands on the searing metal. That motion, submissive, yet not surrendered, ignited something deeper in Halvorsen. There was no sense of victory here, only a silence that hung heavy in the air, as if he were the one standing trial. He didn't see a criminal. He saw a black man, too composed, too steady, making him feel like a student pretending to be in charge of the class. And that's when the shadow of prejudice reared its head. No clear threat, no lawful reason, just something in him. Halvorsen grabbed Merriweather's left wrist and twisted it back hard, moving to cuff him. The motion was sharp, cold, not driven by justice, but by something personal. Merriweather turned his head, voice low and even. "Is this really necessary, officer?" That simple question rang out like a warning bell. But Halvorsen, he no longer heard anything over the roar of his own rising anger. With a slight yank, Halvorsen pulled the general's wrist behind his back. The chilling clink of metal echoed as the handcuffs came off his belt. Millstone Avenue was so quiet, the faint rattle of chain links could be heard bouncing in the still air. Merriweather didn't react. No struggle, no searching for witnesses. He simply tilted his head slightly, eyes fixed on the patrol car side mirror behind him, as if staring not at the street, but straight into the conscience of the officer standing behind him. Halvorsen saw that calmness, and it only made his blood boil hotter. He hated that kind of silence, the kind that made you feel small. In a confrontation you yourself started. "Anything in the car I should know about?" Halvorsen asked, still gripping Merriweather's wrist, his voice now edged with irritation. "I just came back from Fort Linsdale," Merriweather answered, his tone as composed as if delivering orders at a podium. "There are military documents, a bag of clothes, and a few keepsakes. Nothing worth your suspicion." That perfectly reasonable answer only fueled Halvorsen's frustration. He wasn't looking for cooperation. He wanted submission. And right here, with both hands on the hood, Merriweather might have seemed compliant. But he wasn't broken. "I have the right to search the vehicle if I suspect anything," Halvorsen muttered, almost trying to convince himself. He circled around to the passenger door and yanked the handle. "There's no just cause for you to do that," Merriweather said from behind, his voice low, but every word sharp and clear. and we both know it. Halvorsen froze. Somewhere inside, a siren went off. Doubt, hesitation, warning. But that was quickly drowned out by the roar of bruised ego. He couldn't let this man, a black man, a decorated general, lecture him about the law. Not here, not in the town where he held authority. I suspect contraband, Halvorsen snapped, and flung the car door open. He leaned in, rifling through the glove compartment. Inside, a map, a pair of sunglasses, a metal case holding a military insignia. Neatly packed, clean, nothing illegal. But still, he kept digging, as if trying to unearth some excuse to justify his actions. Ever been stopped and searched before? Halvorsen asked, half mocking, half unsteady. Merriweather turned slowly. Their eyes locked. Many times, he replied. Not because I did anything wrong, but because some people think the color of my skin is reason enough. That answer struck Halvorsen like a slap across the face. But he didn't step back. He couldn't. Not after dragging this far. He turned, cuffs in hand, and marched toward Merriweather again, intent on locking him up. No probable cause. No discovery of wrongdoing. But still, he pressed forward, because by now, power had chained up reason. And deep down, Halvorsen knew this wasn't about speeding. It wasn't even about the law. It was about control. And if he let go now, if he backed down, he feared he would be the one exposed. But in that exact moment, as the cold steel brushed Merriweather's wrist, the general closed his eyes, just for a second, and in that split second, memory surged like a scar that never fully healed. Karbala Desert, summer 2003. A sandstorm howled outside a crumbling bunker. A young white sergeant, Daniel McCready, shot in the gut, blood pooling beneath him. The unit was scattered. The radio, silent. No one dared leave cover to pull him back. Except Langston, then Lieutenant Colonel Merriweather. He charged into the open, bullets slicing the air. Dragged McCready to safety. Wrapped the wound with strips torn from his own shirt. Shielded him with his own body while signaling a retreat. By the time the medevac arrived, both were nearly unconscious. On the chopper, McCready grabbed Langston's hand, his voice barely a breath. If I live, it's because of you. Thank you, brother. Merriweather just squeezed his hand, his eyes locked on a sky stained with red dust. He hadn't saved a man because of his skin color, but because he was human. And now, 30 years later, on a peaceful American street, that same hand, the one that once pulled a bleeding soldier from death, was being cuffed by someone who'd never stepped outside his own small-town borders. The moment the cold metal touched Merriweather's left wrist, a voice sliced through the thick air like a blade. Brent, what the hell is going on here? Officer Brent Halvorsen froze. He turned his head, brows nodding in irritation and disbelief. Another patrol car screeched to a stop along Millstone Avenue. About 30 feet away, outstepped Lieutenant Reuben Cade, 41 years old, trim build, crisp uniform. The Georgia heat lifted the edges of his shirt like a warning flag. A storm wasn't coming from the sky. It was coming from within the department. Halvorsen clenched his jaw. Nothing serious, he snapped. Just a speeder trying to act important. Cade didn't reply right away. He walked closer, his eyes darting from Halvorsen to the man standing calmly at the black hood. Then his expression shifted. Wait, is that General Langston Merriweather? Merriweather didn't nod, didn't confirm, just looked at Cade, with the same steady gaze that stirred something deeper than words. Halvorsen scoffed. So what? General or president doesn't give you the right to do 72 in a 55. Brent, Cade said slowly, what exactly are you trying to do here? Halvorsen inhaled sharply, cuffs still in hand. I'm following protocol, searching the vehicle, taking preventive measures. He could be armed. He's a U.S. Army general. He served this country for over 4 decades. What ground do you have to cuff him? Cade's voice dropped, but it rang with clarity. Brent's voice hardened. I don't need a moral lesson right now. You didn't see the way he looked at me. Like I didn't have the right to even ask. Do you hear yourself? Cade asked, pulling out his phone. I don't know what your deal is today, but I know one thing. From this moment on, I'm recording everything. Halvorsen's eyes narrowed. Really, Reuben? You're filming me like I'm the criminal now." "No," Cade replied, switching on the camera, lens locked directly on Brent and the SUV. "I'm saving you from becoming a criminal." Halvorsen exhaled sharply, still gripping Merriweather's wrist. But now his palm was slick with sweat. And then, the unexpected. From across the street, a woman's voice rang out. "I'm filming this too. Nobody try to stop me." All three men turned. A young woman, no more than 21, walked toward them, phone held upright in recording position. T-shirt, jeans, sneakers, drenched in sweat, but her eyes burned bright. Name's Dare Malloy, live streamer for True South Watch. Over 1,000 people are watching right now, and they just saw a U.S. general being treated like a criminal. Her voice was sharp, deliberate, each word a warning. Halvorsen looked like he'd been slapped. Over 1,000 people. Those numbers echoed in his skull like sirens. This wasn't just Cade. Wasn't just Merriweather. It was the world. The air snapped tight. Halvorsen hadn't even moved yet, and the second wave hit. This time, it wasn't man versus man. It was one man versus everyone. The scorching noon sun didn't make Brent Halvorsen sweat. Half as much as the realization that he was now surrounded by 3 cameras. One held by Lieutenant Reuben Cade, a man he once considered a teammate. One held by Dare Malloy, a bridge to a digital crowd already salivating over every second. And a third camera, silent, professional, now zoomed in from across the street behind a silver pickup. Sienna Cook, 33. Blonde ponytail, rolled up sleeves, press badge in one hand, compact camera in the other. Reporter for Southline News Network. She didn't speak, didn't intervene, just filmed. Perfect frame, steady hand, like someone who'd seen this play out before. Halvorsen clenched his jaw and gave the cuffs another tug. Merriweather still didn't resist. But this time he turned, looked Brent in the eye. And that look wasn't calm anymore. It was cold, cutting disappointment. The kind that made any man feel like he'd just been weighed and came up light. "You're not doing this," Merriweather said slowly. "Because I broke the law. You're doing it because you can't stand the sight of an older black man, calm, composed, who isn't afraid of you." The words lit a fuse. "Shut your mouth." Halvorsen snapped, gripping the general's wrist even tighter. "I don't discriminate against anybody. I'm just doing my job." Cade raised his camera slightly, voice unwavering. "You're about to destroy everything, Brent. Your career and who you are. Let him go, or face the consequences." Halvorsen didn't hear. He couldn't hear. His pulse roared in his ears like war drums. His mind spun. Sweat rolled down the back of his neck. Anger had taken full control, and it wouldn't let go. "Film it all," he growled, like a dare thrown at the planet itself. "Go ahead. I'm not afraid of anyone." But Halvorsen couldn't see the scene quietly forming behind him. A few townspeople had gathered. Elaine Tuck, the elderly flower vendor from the corner, raised a trembling hand to her mouth. Kyrie Boone, a high school student, pulled his phone from his backpack and started recording. And Dare Malloy shouted, "Lieutenant Cade, we're at almost 3,000 viewers. It's climbing by the second." Halvorsen gripped Merriweather's shoulder, trying to shove him against the hood to finish cuffing him. But right then, the general turned slightly, and with a simple, fluid motion, freed his wrist from Halvorsen's grip. Not to resist, but to end it. He stood tall. His gaze swept the tightening circle around them. "Enough," Merriweather said. He didn't raise his voice, but it echoed louder than any order Halvorsen had ever heard. "I'm not here to cause trouble, but from this moment on, you won't be able to hide what you do in the dark anymore." Halvorsen froze. The cuff still dangled in his hand, but the power was gone. The air on Millstone Avenue thickened, heavy with something unspeakable, as General Langston Merriweather stood straight, hands free at his sides, and the unused handcuffs hung limp in Brent Halvorsen's grip. No yelling, no threats, just silence, weighted with the full force of history. "You know," Merriweather began, eyes fixed on Halvorsen, "when I was a young soldier stationed at Camp Kershaw, I got pulled over like this. 30 years later, I'm still getting pulled over. But today, I'm done being silent. His voice was low. Each word struck the sun-baked asphalt of Raventon Springs like a hammer. You want to cuff me? Go ahead. But understand this, Officer Halvorsen. You can't cuff the truth. And you damn sure can't lock up my dignity. Halvorsen clenched his jaw. His thoughts tangled. Part of him wanted to end this with a firm snap of the cuffs, to prove he still had control. But another part, deeper, quieter, was cracking, facing a man who refused to bow. You're manipulating this moment, Halvorsen said, his voice tight. You know who you are? And you know everyone's watching. Merriweather nodded gently, no arrogance in his face. I know exactly who I am. I'm an American citizen, not someone important, like you assume. Just a man exercising his rights. The right to fair treatment. And the right not to be disrespected because of his skin. Across the street, Sienna Cook kept filming, her grip steady, like she was building a live broadcast of history in real time. I've filmed plenty of these, she whispered to herself, but I've never seen someone hold their ground like him. Darren Malloy, speaking into her mic, added, almost 5,000 watching now. They're calling him the man who stood on Millstone. And Lieutenant Reuben Cade, still behind his camera, spoke just loud enough for Halvorsen to hear. You still have a chance to do the right thing, Brent. But that door's closing with every second. Halvorsen felt everything slipping through his fingers. He hadn't struck anyone, hadn't pulled a baton, hadn't dragged anyone to the ground. But what was unfolding now exposed the most insidious kind of abuse. Humiliation by power. And he knew the cameras wouldn't miss it. Merriweather stared him straight in the eye. You don't have to like me. You can even hate my skin. But you'll be held accountable. Not because I'm a general, but because I'm a human being. And the law in this country is still supposed to protect humans. The words rang out like a church bell on a summer noon. They didn't need to be shouted. They didn't need to threaten. They were just true, and truth carries weight. Halvorsen stood there, cuff still in hand. But in that moment, he was the one truly bound. 3 hours after the confrontation on Millstone Avenue ended, the video had already crossed 1.2 million views. News tickers rolled across Southline News Network, SNN Atlanta, and even national outlets like WNN. Army General cuffed in broad daylight by local police. The name Langston Merriweather returned to headlines, not for another mission in the Middle East, but as a symbol of dignity under siege and civil rights under threat. As for Brent Halvorsen, his name became synonymous with the hashtag Cuff the General. At the Raventon Springs Police Department, the air was thick like stone. Every colleague's eyes followed Halvorsen as he walked down the hall, sweat bleeding through his still unchanged uniform shirt. No one spoke. No one greeted him. Just the quiet, steady drip of a coffee pot, like a doomsday clock ticking down on the end of a career. When he stepped into the captain's office, Captain Wesley Drummond was already waiting, a file in hand, his expression stone cold. Sit down, Drummond said. We've got things to deal with. Halvorsen sat. Before he could speak, Drummond slid a printed photo across the desk. It was from social media, a still image of Halvorsen gripping Merriweather's wrist. Face flushed red, hand gripping an unused cuff. You know this image's already made it to Washington? Halvorsen said nothing. Any words now would just be noise. And this, Drummond continued, sliding a manila envelope toward him, is your suspension order, effective immediately. And for the record, the FBI called this morning. They're stepping in. Halvorsen shot to his feet, voice flaring. I followed procedure. He was speeding. I didn't do anything wrong. Drummond's voice dropped, sharp and final. You didn't do anything right either, Brent. Right then, the conference room door swung open. A woman in a white button-down shirt stepped in. Sharp features, steely eyes. I'm Special Agent Carla Vance, FBI. This is my associate, Miles Donnelly. The man behind her gave a nod and placed a document bag on the table. We're requesting a full copy of Officer Halvorsen's behavioral file for the past 3 years, Vance said, and we want the unedited footage. Every second, body cam included if he had one running. Drummond glanced over at Halvorsen, whose face now looked pale as wax. But the real climax hadn't arrived until a sharp knock hit the conference room door. A civilian staffer poked his head in, panting. General Merriweather just went live on television. The whole state's watching. The room froze. At SNN Atlanta studio, General Langston Merriweather's image appeared on screen. Seated upright in full dress uniform, medals gleaming across his chest. "I did not come to make war," he said into the camera, "but I cannot stay silent when civil rights are crushed by arrogance and fear. I do not seek justice for myself, but for everyone who has ever been forced to bow their head, just because they were born in this skin." The air in the meeting room was sucked dry. No one looked at Brent Halvorsen as a colleague anymore. They looked at him as a symbol of abuse. That evening at Cafe Briarhall, a place once known only for almond muffins and strong black coffee, every seat was taken, not because of the food, not because of the AC, but because all eyes were fixed on an old TV mounted to the red brick wall. General Langston Merriweather sat on screen, facing the anchor of Southline News Network, with the American flag behind him and a soft glow hugging the trim of his uniform. But the real light was in his words. "I've worn this uniform for over 40 years, Merriweather began, his voice steady. "I've fought in the deserts of Iraq. I've faced rockets and hopelessness. But I've never felt invisible, like the moment a police officer looked me in the eye and saw only a suspect." The cafe held its breath. Even those who once doubted the story now bowed their heads. At the Raventon Springs Police Department, Brent Halvorsen sat alone in a darkened office, door shut. The flickering fluorescent bulb above him felt like a cruel reminder of reality. Just 24 hours ago, he believed he was a keeper of order. Now, he was the man who disrupted the order of justice. "I don't share this to stir anger," Merriweather continued. "I share it to spark awakening. If someone like me, who's stood before presidents, who's protected this nation, can still be humiliated in the street, then what has become of those with no stars on their collar, no medals on their chest?" The studio audience was silent. The host placed a hand on her heart, as if steadying herself against the weight of his truth. "I don't ask for privilege," Merriweather said, eyes locked on the lens. "I ask for reform. And reform doesn't come from slogans. It comes from courage. The courage to face ourselves, to admit that the system is cracking." At that very moment, Sienna Cook, the reporter who filmed the original scene, shared the full broadcast on her personal account. Within 2 hours, the video had surpassed 4 million views, sparking an avalanche of comments from veterans, professors, students, single mothers, all echoing one message. It's time we started listening, not just reacting. And as Merriweather ended the interview with a solemn vow, "I will see this through, not to retaliate, but to repair." He was no longer just a veteran who had been humiliated. He had become the voice of a movement. In the dim corner of his office, Halvorsen buried his face in both hands. Even with his phone on silent, notifications kept lighting up the screen. Press inquiries, civil rights attorneys, threats, and contempt. He hadn't just lost power. He had become a symbol of everything the country now wanted to erase. 3 days after General Langston Merriweather's historic interview, the East Georgia Prosecutor's Office issued an official statement. The FBI had launched a full investigation into Brent Halvorsen, not only for the abuse of power that day, but for his entire conduct during the 7 years he served at the Raventon Springs Police Department. Inside a closed conference room, Halvorsen sat across from 2 federal agents, Carla Vance and Miles Donnelly. No uniform, no badge, just a man in a wrinkled shirt, his wrist trembling slightly as he set a glass of water on the table. "We've reviewed the body cam footage," Vance began. Her voice wasn't cold, but it carried no softness. There was no legal justification to search the vehicle. No signs of threat, no reasonable suspicion. Halvorsen stared at the floor. He had heard those words in his mind hundreds of times, but hearing them out loud from a federal agent under the white lights of an interrogation room felt like an indictment dripping in blood. "And here's the bigger problem," Donnelly continued, sliding a stack of documents across the table. "In 2019, you stopped a black man walking home. He ended up detained for 36 hours. No charges, no report. The next page detailed a spring 2021 incident. A single mother pulled over for a flickering brake light, which led to a search of her 9-year-old son. No evidence, no charges, but plenty of complaints never addressed. "You assumed these little things would go unnoticed," Vance said, locking eyes with him. "But when little things keep repeating, they form a pattern. And this pattern has a color." Halvorsen didn't argue. He knew. For years, he'd acted from bias, not justice, but always cloaked himself in the law. Now the law had come knocking, on his conscience, with the full weight of truth. "We're not just investigating you," Donnelly added calmly. "We're reviewing the entire training and oversight protocol at Raventon Springs PD. If systemic bias is confirmed, the whole department could face federal action." Sitting there, Halvorsen was no longer a police officer. He was a living snapshot of a system in desperate need of light. Before leaving, Vance paused at the door and looked at him. "You had a chance to be a guardian of order, but you chose to become the face of disorder. Now, you're learning the lesson too many have been forced to endure in silence." The door shut, and in that cold, sterile room, Halvorsen realized, justice doesn't always come swiftly, but when it arrives, it leaves no one untouched. That night, Brent Halvorsen sat alone in the living room of his small house in Sycamore Crest. The television was still on, but the sound had faded into a ghostly hum from the evening news. Light from the screen danced along the wall, casting his shadow in a warped, broken shape, just like the way the world now saw him, distorted, fractured, and beyond saving. Outside the window, a black, unmarked vehicle paused for a moment, then quietly drove off. Brent didn't need to look. He already knew. Federal surveillance. Temporary oversight while the investigation widened. No one greeted him when he stepped outside anymore. No more colleagues inviting him out for a beer after shift. Even the neighborhood kid who used to call him Officer Brent now avoided his gaze. The phone on the table buzzed. A new alert lit up the screen. Special report. One wrong move and the fall of an officer. Brent Halvorsen, from protector to cautionary symbol. He didn't click it. He didn't have to. He already knew. He had become the name people invoked when talking about what was broken in policing. Not because of a single arrest, but because of a single choice made at exactly the wrong moment. And in that moment, Halvorsen saw himself more clearly than ever before. Not as a victim, not as the hunted, but as a man who had carved his name into the collective scar of a nation, where trust had been worn thin by those sworn to protect it. He once thought power was armor, but now he understood. Power never shields you from your own lack of integrity. It only reveals the truth of who's wearing it. Meanwhile, in Atlanta, at the modest hall of the Georgia State Civil Rights Institute, General Langston Merriweather stepped up to the podium. No cameras, no stage lights, just a room full of students, teachers, and everyday citizens. He raised a copy of the U.S. Constitution in his hand. "Someone asked me why I remained calm when I was humiliated in the street," he said, then paused, eyes sweeping the room. "Because anger is easy, but wisdom, dignity, and truth, those are what force wrongdoing to bow." Applause followed, not loud but sincere, the kind that comes from people who recognize something real. The kind he had earned, through pain, through patience, and through standing tall. Brent Halvorsen turned off the lights and headed upstairs. He didn't know what waited for him. Disciplinary charges, a court hearing, or simply being forgotten. But he knew one thing for sure. A single moment of losing control can cost you a lifetime of being defined by it. And in the silence of that house, if one listened closely, they could hear something. Not Halvorsen's voice, but the voice of a nation asking itself, how many more lessons will it take for us to truly change? I hope today's story left something with you, not just about justice, but about courage, dignity, and the power of choice. If you believe this message deserves to be heard, please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the stories to come. In the meantime, I've handpicked 2 more for you. Each one carries a powerful message about humanity and life. Thank you for watching, and may peace follow you through your day.